Hi, everybody. My name is Matt Webster. I'm the founder, CEO, and CISO for Cyvergence. And today we're going to be talking about my new course, Becoming the Next Generation CISO, Bridging Business and Cybersecurity with Emotional Intelligence. So some of you may note that I've already got a presentation that's out there. This is an update from what we had done in the past. So it is a lot of the same material, but there's a lot of new stuff because I really wanted to bring in the why, make it more important to people to understand what the context is. And we're going to talk about some of the statistics and go into some of the details about why I feel this course is so important. But let's go ahead and jump into it. So why this course? There's a lot of different health issues. Stress and burnout are very common amongst chief information security officers. The stress levels also very high. 88% reported moderate to tremendous amounts of stress as a result of the position they're in. And 48% reported an impact to their mental health. 23% said the CISO role caused them to seek help. And so we're seeing medication and substance abuse. I'm sure some are authorized substances, some are unauthorized substances. Either way, this is very concerning, looking at the statistics here. Many of you have seen this before that are in the CISO. 50% of CISOs are looking to leave their jobs. This wasn't terribly surprising to me. And part of the reason is that 50% of people want to leave their job anyway. It's not the surprising part of this. The 25% of CISOs who are looking to leave the industry altogether is a little bit more concerning. So this means they're in cybersecurity. Now they're doing something else because they might be an expert at it, but there were factors that made it so they did not want to be in the industry anymore. And that speaks volumes right there. There's a lot of challenges in the industry. So Ian's, jump forward a couple of years here, and this was in January 2024, said between 67 and 75% of CISOs are looking to switch their job. And I do believe this. And to be fair, this is after Tim Brown was sued by the Security Exchange Commission. And I think there were a lot of people who were very nervous at that particular time. But that being said, I know a lot of CISOs who have left their roles altogether. It's a big concern. There's a large number of them who said, nope, not going back to the CISO role for a variety of different reasons. They do have the lowest lifespan of any C-suite, 5.3 years, but the average CISO lasts 2 years. Now, this number has changed around a lot. Like when I first became a CISO, I saw the number was at 17 months. I've seen it go up to 24 months, and I've seen it bounce between the two. A lot of people cite the 2 years in the role. Now, I've known CISOs who have lasted just a couple of months, and I know CISOs that have lasted a long period of time. There's a lot of variation in between, but that average has not changed over the years. And that's what's so concerning. So the bigger picture, 70% of people don't want to become managers because they've never had a good manager. And part of this, there's a lot of different reasons for this. I go into this in the course, but I think a lot of it is there just isn't training out there for managers. They stick them in a new role and expect them to excel, and they have no idea how to transition. They have no idea what they're doing. 50% of people, like I said before, but CISOs are in a tough position, especially if they're reporting into a technical function. I was talking with one CISO, for example, because it's been a couple of years, but he would actually transitioned away from a technical role and put the whole security department underneath the CEO, and the problem's cleared up. But usually it's that, hey, I notice here there's a gap. What are we able to do with that? That's going to be a bit of a problem. And so what happens is in many instances, CIOs and others, they want to kind of bury things. And so that creates a lot of antagonism if CISOs are reporting into it. So I do work with a lot of companies. I work with them both from an executive perspective and I work with them from a security perspective to try to get them to understand what the challenges are from a business. I've got a lot to say on that. I talk about a lot more in the course, but if most people had management training, we're unprepared. So if CISOs get into a CISO role, they're unprepared, they're untrained, that creates a lot of challenges for organizations. So I do want to take a minute or so to talk about Boeing. Boeing is very interesting. There's different documentaries on it, and they were talking about how MacArthur Douglas started to change the culture of Boeing because the people who were senior within MacArthur Douglas ended up taking on the senior positions within Boeing, probably because they could save money and they knew how to work with that. Now, what's interesting in this documentary, they were interviewing a lot of people who actually worked on the Boeing aircraft themselves, who were building them. So what they found was in the past, they had a strong engineering culture. And that engineering culture, I'd like to use as a metaphor for IT, just so you kind of understand that context. But they started making more and more mistakes. Now, people that were in the industry and a lot of the engineers said, I don't want to fly in a Boeing aircraft anymore. That should speak volumes right there. But here's what's a little bit more interesting. There's only one person they could find. So they went and interviewed several different people and said, well, I don't mind flying on a Boeing aircraft, but I got a death wish. I really don't mind. So when you hear things like that, these are very concerning statistics. So IT is kind of put in this crunch within businesses, but security is put in a larger crunch within businesses. So this is definitely a big concern. The other side of the house, and these are of the personality type that I have dealt with myself and kind of understand the larger context of that, is something called the dark triad. I'd love to tell you I made it up, but I did not. I discovered this through looking at a lot of different resources and researching and things like that. But these are the worst combination of traits. This is narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism. Narcissism, and these are usually considered when they're getting into a malevolent form of these particular traits. And there's a lot to say about them. They behave in a lot of different ways. When you look at the psychopathy, is somebody who's a psychopath. So a psychopath, basically, they're devoid of a lot of the emotions and the rationality that you'd find in others. They're willing to harm others and don't really care. They're devoid of that sort of emotion or caring about other people. And the Machiavellianism has to do with the manipulation. So these are very concerning because they'll do a lot of things. I'm going to touch just on a few things in the next slide, but not going into it. And there is the dark tetrad. They're even more rare. But the reality is when you look at CISO roles and you look at the people within the C-suite, they tend towards the dark triad. So that means they're probably not the best managers, and they tend to go into a situation where they're going to be in those senior leadership positions for a lot of different reasons. But the dark triad is, for whatever reason, attracted to those types of roles. I've seen different estimates. Some of them are 5 times as likely to be in a C-level position they would before. I've seen some numbers like 12% are psychopaths. So there are definitely some issues. As CISOs, as C-level executives, we need to learn about these roles. We need to figure out who they are and know how to respond to them, because they can do some truly despicable things when you start to look at these things in a very malevolent way. If you had like a 1% of the influence here, that's not really an issue for people. Everybody's got that. I try to look fairly nice on camera here. So you say, well, great, I've got a 1% narcissism rate. It's not really what people are talking about, because you need to have some sort of healthiness out there in terms of how you communicate and work with others. So the dark triad does operate a little bit differently. They're not there to achieve mutual agreement. They're going to say, if you go up to them and say, oops, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Oftentimes they're not going to respond to you. They've got some sort of jealousy or some kind of, inherent personality trait where they're trying to undermine you once they decide on the target. Now, typically when you talk about dark triad, they go for the strongest person in the room. They go after the people who might possibly make them look bad or be able to show them up or even look better than them in any possible way. So they don't try to achieve mutual agreement. They're trying to destroy you. They don't align with you. They're not trying to. They're trying to get in that one-upmanship game to make sure that you're put in your place. They oftentimes will not apologize. And I've heard some people say they never apologize. I personally have witnessed an apology from somebody, but all you have to do is think yourself, oh, they never apologize. Therefore, if I apologize, I'm not a dark triad. It's just one of those logical inconsistencies I don't see, but they typically don't, but it depends on the person. But when you're around somebody who's a dark triad, oftentimes there's a lack of empathy there, and you can feel it. I've dealt with that on multiple occasions. And it's part of the reason that I came up with this course is to help teach CISOs about the extremes of personality so they know how to handle it. And that's what I'm doing here. But a lot of times their goal is, dominance or to destroy you, as I said before. And there's a lot of mechanisms they have. They can do things like gaslighting. They try to get you to believe one thing is true and something else is true. Other times they're going to get a whole bunch of different people to go after you and do the same thing to you. And if they can, they're going to try to mob you and get a whole group of people to go after you, even at a single point in time. And I personally have witnessed these types of behaviors within organizations. And I think it's something that CISOs really need to be prepared for and know how to handle and when to work with people in that particular case. And that's part of what this course is about. Dark Triad typically doesn't have a conscience. They don't care if they emotionally destroy you. They don't care about some of these other things. They will twist anything you say or do. If you try to say, hey, I'd like to do X, or I think X is true, that's a problem because they're going to take it and twist it to whatever they want it to say. And you've got to be prepared to handle these types of people. And they will weaponize your bad behavior. And there's a whole bunch of things that go into this. Like, for example, when you're under abuse, your intelligence actually goes down in relationship to the abuse. So you can lose 20 IQ points. You start doing things that are not very intelligent. I've been in that situation. I get it. I believe that. So if you're losing a lot of your IQ, you're not going to be at your best in your job. And so my goal is to figure out how do we get you at your best for your job? And that's what this course is. So here's an overview of the course. It is 5 days long. Right now, I do flexible scheduling. And right now, we're currently looking to start our third beta cohort. This training is going to be online via Zoom and can be recorded in case you miss a session. So these is like the high level details. And it is an intense course. There's a lot that's going into it. So one of the things I'm going to be asking the third cohort that I'm starting to get right now is, what should I remove from the training? I have too much training where it's a little bit above, 40 hours, and I'm trying to cut it down a little bit, but still make sure that people get the quality that they're looking for. So that's what the third cohort's all about. So here's the high level agenda. Of course, we go through the introductions, but I go into the internal and external CISO pressures. This is a big one because CISOs are underneath a lot of pressure, and understanding the pressure in context is so important for something like this. So, and a lot of that I briefly spoke about from an IT perspective, but I think that's something everybody needs to understand, that they're under a lot of pressures, and that creates a lot of challenges. People are familiar with Joe Sullivan and so on, and that does create some challenges. It creates some ethical challenges. So what I do for the participants is start to get them involved in some of these participatory context to see how are they going to respond and prepare them and get them prepared for where the ethics. So trying to define that ethical line is extraordinarily important for you as a CISO. Then the next thing I do, we go into corporate financial literacy. Now, to me, this is really important because a lot of CISOs don't know how to speak to other executives. I've been in that role myself, and I've been speaking the tech speak when I'm making those kinds of mistakes. What they want to know is, what are the outcomes, what are the context, and other things. And I go into these details ad nauseum. We also have creating business alignment. And this is a problem both at the executive level and also at the CISO level as well. So they don't know how to align with IT and or security. And a lot of times security does not know how to align with IT or the business. And so there's a lot of things to go into for that business alignment that I think are absolutely important. Some of it is stepping outside. So I'm a little bit of a maverick. I recommend things that are typically IT is doing, but I think they're great for cybersecurity as well. They're fantastic, in fact. But a lot of this, we start to get into the soft skills. Like I briefly touched on the dark triad here. But in this course, I cover this. I cover what is the psychological response, what actually happens to you. In one of the slides, I talk about how 20% of your brain, the front part of your brain, starts to go down as a result of dealing with sustained abuse. So that's something that you really have to think about. So having the soft skills, understanding the context and understanding how the psychopaths and others are going to influence what you're doing, having soft skills and being able to recognize the problem early and respond to it in a way that's going to be most advantageous for the CISO role, that's what I do. This is a pretty long section just on the soft skills. Then we get into building the communication skills. These are skills that I find a lot of CISOs don't necessarily have, but they're areas where there could be improvement. And this covers everything, how to use your voice. This talks about posture and things like that. And then how do you communicate to executives and building the business case and doing all of those types of things as part of the communication skills. We do take a little bit of time to go through a cybersecurity program to kind of understand, hey, how should you organize it? What are the problems that I've seen in various organizations? And what are the different types of things to consider? Because there are a lot of different types of CISOs and a lot of different contexts that I'm not going to go into here, but they're good for CISOs to know, especially the junior ones aren't familiar with some of these other ways of handling things. When I started out as a CISO, I didn't know this stuff. I learned this stuff over a period of time. And that's what I'm coming to bring you now to educate you so you can fast track a lot of your knowledge and know what to do and have options to help you as a CISO better work. The personnel and corporate context. So this is getting into things like culture that your organization might be in. And so understanding how the corporation fits into it, how does their culture fit in? And then how does a greater culture fit into this whole thing? And a little bit about how to build more positive cultures within your organization. So that's where the personnel and corporate context comes in. Then we get into management and leadership. These are all the latest practices and things like that. And a lot of this stuff, like the soft skills that I talked about, this bleeds in throughout the rest of the course. So the management and leadership, this is talking about the distinction between management and leadership. And talking about what can you do and how do you improve your game across the board. This is another really big section. We spent a lot of time just on this area. Then we get into planning for your success as a CISO. I do cover what I think are the first 100 days and what I think is going to be best for you. And it's probably a little bit different from what most people actually say, but I think that it's much more effective to help you as a CISO do better. It's been very helpful for a lot of other people. They're taking in the skills and learning about some of these things and applying them out there related to their job. So the critical role of risk management. I love risk management. It's my favorite part of cybersecurity, hands down. But I do cover this from a lot of different things. I talk about qualitative, various types of quantitative assessments and, how to look at risk management from a broader perspective as well. I touch a little bit on something called enterprise risk management. Some of you CISOs are probably familiar with it, others are not. Then we're going to get into advancing cybersecurity programs. And again, this is all to help you do better, getting into the governance, getting into some of these other things that are going to help you do better. And this is getting where we get into like key performance indicators. How does that work? And I like to compare between performance indicators and key performance indicators, and also performance indicators that the business does. So I have you guys developing everything that you need to do in order to be successful from that perspective. Then, of course, we dive into cybersecurity and the board of directors. So this is a high-level overview of what we're going to be covering over the 5 days. I have a lot of teaching methodologies. Feel free to put this on pause. I'm not going to go through this in here, but all of these thoughts are part of the process of building this particular program. We do have a lot of simulations. We have progressive complexity where we take things and build on them in different ways. There's a lot of collaborative learning and a lot of regular breaks, but all this stuff is part of what I'm doing from the teaching perspective. But here's some other high-level stuff. Group discussions, very, very common. So every time you see this picture, you know that there's going to be discussion for 30 minutes or less. It could be 5 minutes. It could be close to 30 minutes. It all depends. I do something called deep dives. Like, for example, with the financial skills, I'm going to have you use in the course the financial skills that you're learning. So now that you've learned them, one of the deep dives is specifically related to that. They can last a little bit more than an hour. Of course, case studies. Case studies to me are absolutely critical. We cover real world scenarios. We talk about the reality of what's going on between lots of different organizations. We have a lot of different thoughts, and it's a very interactive course, but the case studies provide that information. And I want to get your feedback on all of them because that dialogue, that discussion with other people is a very important part of the course. Improvement games. I did include these throughout the course. I think these are important. It's basically where I'm going to provide a poor statement, and then others start to work and provide a better response. Now, a lot of people love these, um, and they're extraordinarily important a learning tool. But the reality is, it's so interesting. People have a really hard time creating proper responses for these. They have to sit down and think about it. It's not something that's going to be a challenge. So the students are going to respond, and then the instructor is going to show the recommended statement. Right now, I am the instructor. And of course, when to exit. These are just suggestions. You don't have to. And sometimes it's going to refer to your team member. Sometimes it's going to be referred to you. You know, there are times when a CISO should leave. And I do fully 100% believe that. So I go into that as well. But I want to thank you very much for your time. If you're interested in the course, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I have my contact information right there. You go to cyvergence.biz, you can see some information. You can also sign in there and send me a note via the website. So there are multiple ways of getting hold of me. I'm here to help you out. That's what this course is about. It is about helping people. And it has grown tremendously. I thought this was going to be a 2 or 3 day course, but as I said, it's a full 5 day course and non-technical. But I'd love to hear from you and let me know what you think. Thank you so much for your time. Bye-bye.